Hi guys, I've said people like Boris Johnson are lazy and that the Tories are not interested in doing the hard work necessary to fix the problems they create. So it's a tad ironic that they attack people on benefits as being work shy and needing a kick up the backside to fill jobs that are currently being done by immigrants. The fundamental problem is that the Conservatives don't want the poorest in society to have decent wages. They ideologically prefer a race to the bottom. But at the same time, they don't want immigrants in the country as it turns off their voter base. So the logical solution is to punish those on benefits. Here a former Tory advisor explains.
It is a really worrying thing. And I think let's go really big to start with. The United Kingdom is just not a very rich country anymore, right? And therefore, we can't just subsidize, what is it you said, a fifth of working age people to just sit at home and not work. I mean, that is not something that any country, any civilization even that wants to survive can get away with doing, with having.
Okay, so he mentioned that Britain is not a very rich country. Isn't it funny that when the Tories were in power, they were talking about how Britain was the fastest growing nation in the G7. It was attracting investment. Everything was great. Now when it comes to benefits, actually we're really poor. Okay, which is it? Is it the country is rich or the country is poor? It's so funny that when it comes to helping ordinary people, we're really poor, we can't afford that. 20% of the wealth in Britain is owned by the top 1%. A fifth of all wealth is owned by the top 1%. So Britain is technically rich, it's not evenly distributed.
That many people around. And look, let's do the important caveats we've always got to do. Those people who are never going to be able to work again because of whatever the illness is, of course, it's a wonderful, noble thing that we do. And by the way, we do this anyway with the whole point of a progressive taxation system. Something like 50% of all income tax is paid by the top 1% of people. Those with the broadest shoulders already take a massive burden, and that gets really.
And he's talking about income tax, but the majority of the richest people in society don't pay a huge amount of income tax because most of their income is not based, most of their revenue is not based on working. It's on, for example, stocks and shares and investments.
Be distributed to schools and hospitals and benefits and all those sorts of things. That already happens. And that's great. As you say, for those who genuinely need it, a safety net, not some kind of clawing straitjacket that we've got for so many people. And I think it's a kind of misplaced empathy. Oh, isn't it nice we can look after these sorts of people? Well, it's not that nice if people just make the calculation that it's fine for them just to stay at home and not bother going to work. And they never understand the dignity of going to work. They never understand what it can do to your sense of self-esteem.
And that's my argument when people talk to me about,
Many people can't work. You notice that they never come out with a figure. They never say, okay, this number of people are work shy. This number of people are able to work, but they don't want to work. They never come out with a figure. Isn't that strange? Because there's so many people who want to work, but they can't for a number of reasons. For example, they're on the NHS waiting list. They're waiting to get treatment before they can start working. No mention of that here. Many people where the jobs are not in their area, and it's not feasible to spend huge amounts of money on public transport or on a car or whatever to get to the location where the job is. And even if they could, the wages are too low. So what they try to suggest here is that, well, benefits are too high. Benefits are too high and wages are too low. So what we need to do is force people off benefits and into jobs, even if the wages are low.
I have a female friend who is working from home, and as I said it the other day, and it's getting to the point where she sees nobody. She even goes out on a coffee run in the morning to feel like she meets people, and it's impacting on her in terms of her sociability.
What's that got to do with unemployment? We're talking about people who are not working, and you bring up a point about somebody working from home. I understand that Talk TV have this bugbear with people working from home. In many cases, people may not be able to get into the office because the office have downsized. Businesses have realized, look, we don't need all these staff in an office, which is costing us a huge amount of money, rent, heat, air conditioning, facilities, stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask a lot of people to work from home. Is that the fault of the people working from home? Like, what is working from home got to do with people who are on benefits?
For me, it's really, people will on the one hand jump up and say, oh, you don't understand. Well, we've just used those caveats. There are people who cannot work, and I am really happy to play into a system that says, I'm going to help you because you can't help yourselves. But, I read figures today that says the spiralling figures among British-born adults, right, this worklessness, is fueling a migration crisis, which because I'm not as experienced as you, it immediately makes me think this. So when Blair opened the borders and had everybody in, because apparently we need people in this country to do those jobs, that presumably sent a message to the people who weren't that keen on working or weren't they, to just stay at home. I think we should be encouraging.
No, let him finish.
Nay, forcing in some instances these people out of their houses, and there must.
There we have it. We have to force people out of their houses into jobs. Would this host be happy with an elderly parent or relative being looked after by someone in a care home who didn't want to be there, who was forced out of their home into the care sector? Would he be happy with that? I would love to ask him this question. He will never answer this question. But this is a question posed to anyone who thinks that it would be a good idea to force people into jobs. There are people who can't work. There are people it's not feasible for them to work in these jobs because they're far away or they don't pay enough to pay their rent or to cover their costs. That's why so many immigrants are doing these jobs. But would anyone out there, would you be happy with an elderly parent or relative being looked after by somebody who didn't want to be doing that job, but was doing it because they were forced to?
Must be jobs. There must be things that they can do to give back to our society. Fiscally, how does that not make sense?
Yeah, again, you're right. By the way, some of these numbers of people not in work, the majority of them are Brits, but there's almost 250,000 foreigners working, not working, who are living in this country. So there's 250,000 foreigners.
Foreigners? Which foreigners? Because there are students. Students are not working. Are you including them? There are people, asylum seekers, who are not allowed to work. Are you suggesting now that asylum seekers should be allowed to work? But then if you say, well, let's allow asylum seekers to work, then you're going to say, well, what about British people who aren't working? So there's a sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't. On the one side, Tories will say, don't allow asylum seekers to work because they're going to steal British jobs. But then on the other hand, they say, look at all these asylum seekers not working, living off the state. Like when he talks about foreigners, which foreigners is he talking about?
Who've come over here and are claiming benefits and not working, which is itself completely ludicrous. And of course, those people will be perhaps dependents of those who've come over to work. But that, again, that adds up to the whole tax burden. And this is
Dependents can't claim benefits. Dependents can't claim. They're dependent on the people who are already there. This guy allegedly is a former Conservative special advisor. He doesn't sound very special, and he doesn't sound like an advisor.
Kind of madness that we've got, that we only look at, well, here's what some migrants can contribute. And yet, some migrants contribute an awful lot. My other half, as you know, is American, contributes an awful lot, works very hard, but there are plenty who don't. And so there's a whole...
Which don't? Because if you're saying migrants don't contribute, then who are you talking about? Are you talking about asylum seekers? Then we know that they can't work. Some of them are working in the black economy, but you also have a problem with that. They work because they don't want to be sitting around in a hotel all day. They would prefer to be earning some extra money. So which foreigners are you talking about? Which immigrants? Because immigrants generally arrive in the country to work. Or if they're dependents, they're arriving with their family. But we saw recently what the Tories did was they decided we're not going to allow immigrants to take, in certain cases, to take dependents with them. So what happened? Well, universities are now struggling to get the students they need because dependents are not allowed to arrive. Success! We're destroying universities now. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.